I'm Avantika Sharma and I welcome you to our new episode on the power of data. An insightful series based on its significance in a world where we shape, transform, and translate information into a visual context through a map or other graphical representations. Data visualizations help us to identify patterns, trends, outliers in large data sets and enables the human brain to pull understand and pull insight from. Let us analyze the trends in public mobility today with our guest, Dr. Arushi Jain, who is the Associate Director at the Bharati Institute of Public Policy and extensively uses data for research in her institution. Welcome to the studio, ma'am.
Thanks, Avantika.
Ma'am, we would like to start by understanding what do we exactly mean by mobility data, and are Facebook and Google mobility one and the same thing?
Avantika, I really appreciate the topic that you've picked up today because this is a very imperative topic in the post, COVID phase. So, mobility data depicts the percentage gap in footfall in public places when it compares with the baseline.
Okay.
And I'm sure you would like to know what a baseline means here.
Absolutely.
So, a baseline period is represented by a number which is calculated by taking a mean value from 5 weeks.
Okay.
Taking an example, if I talk about COVID particularly, the period from January 3rd to 6th February 2020 is considered as the baseline for post-COVID trends.
Oh, I see. Can you explain this further, ma'am, in the context of the pandemic itself?
Yes, if I talk about the pandemic, Google and Facebook came up with the initiative of publishing aggregated, anonymized insights through Google Maps.
I see.
These are initiatives that will help policymakers and authorities to make very effective decisions.
Okay.
So, you initially were asking about the difference between Facebook and Google mobility.
Mm-hmm.
And if I come to that, Google Mobility is the web-based tool freely available to the public. And it provides insights on how community visits have reduced or increased in a particular place.
Okay.
So the data is available in percentage changes. It tells us about the visits over the last few weeks to places such as pharmacies, or you can take parks, places of work, public transportation hubs, and anything in particular in cities or in a particular region.
All right.
Whereas, if we talk about the Facebook mobility data, these data sets let researchers look at population movement between 2 points. The movement pattern, such as commutes, and also allows them to see whether people are staying close to home or visiting many parts of the town at different times.
Okay.
So, this data was very interesting to note when we had lockdowns and when we had the unlock phases, how the movement of people was affecting the overall economy.
Okay. So, ma'am, what does the data really tell us about the public movement post-lockdown?
It does tell us a lot, Avantika.
Okay.
So, data from Google Mobility Report across India for parks and public stations shows us the footfall in public places. So, where was the movement lowest at the time of the first lockdown? And has it bounced back to the pre-pandemic levels after, the lockdown was over? And if we see the trends in most of the northern and central states of India, like say Uttar Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Haryana, Madhya Pradesh, Odisha, Jharkhand, Rajasthan, we find that the trend is very, very positive. It has bounced back to the pre-pandemic phase in that way.
Can you please tell us if you observed a similar trend in Northeast India as well?
Northeast India has its own peculiarity. And, the trends in Northeast are very similar to those in the hill states. So I would not segregate Northeast, but would like to mention the Himalayan states in that way.
Okay.
So with the second wave of the COVID, the Delta variant being responsible for most number of cases in 6 of the 8 northeastern states, the states recorded lowest level of mobility.
Oh, I see.
And I'll give you another example. Taking public stations, for example, the states of Nagaland, Manipur, Mizoram, Meghalaya witnessed a downtrend and the mobility of around minus 50% in the month of May. I'm talking of 2021. However, this started improving and this went a little up and it was minus 30% in July 2021.
Okay.
Taking another example, let's talk about public parks. So in the public parks also, which is open spaces, in the hill states, people were scared of going out. And there were lockdowns or there were restrictions that were there, because of which, the mobility was around minus 30 to minus 20% in May 2021, and it bounced back to minus 15 to minus 6% in July 2021. So this is an example of the phase 2 of the pandemic.
And what about mobility in the southern states?
Southern states, if we compare it to the Northeast India, then they were performing, the mobility was much more. But compared to the northern states, it was lesser.
Okay.
And, the overall impact was least in Kerala and Tamil Nadu in mobility trends for parks for July 2021. So we also have to remember impacting the different locations at different times is evident through the data that we see here.
Right.
Yeah. And if I compare 2020 to 21, the trends I have already, told you. But if we look at the top 4 states with the highest gross state domestic product, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, Uttar Pradesh, and Karnataka had the higher mobility from the pre-pandemic baseline of in the 2021 year. Which means that the lockdown restrictions were not severe and it was much more mobile for people and the economy was resilient to the overall impact of the second wave.
I see. Could you please explain the concept of gross state domestic product and the trends a little further?
Definitely, Avantika. Gross state domestic product is a measure in monetary terms. To explain you very simply about it, the sum of all finished goods and services produced during a given period of time. And generally, we take this time as a year.
Okay.
And we also restrict it into a geographical boundary, which is, say, a state. So that is why it is called gross state domestic product. So if we look at data, it shows that Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, and Uttar Pradesh and Karnataka were among the top 4 states. It means that these states whose GSDP is highest were having highest mobility of people, indicating that economic recovery and economic activity didn't come to an actual halt during the second wave, which was the case during the first wave.
I see.
So, this shows that the states contributed to India's economic recovery as hubs of economic activity. In total, if you see this entire trend that we have talked about from the Google mobility data is very interesting. And it talks about the trends around public stations and parks, where, it was recorded as lowest mobility in certain states like Maharashtra and others, between minus 40 to minus 8% in April 2021 as compared to minus 60 to minus 50% in April 2020. So it's just all about data. You can interpret data, you can see how data is helping us in looking at economic recovery, how data is helping us interpreting these trends of a V-shaped or a U-shaped recovery. So it's just all about data. And as your show says, data in itself is the power.
Absolutely. Totally agree with you there. And we thank you so much for this engaging and informative talk.
Thank you so much, Avantika.
Friends, you can explore Google Mobility and Facebook Mobility datasets on www.indiadataportal.com/IndiaPulse and make interesting visualizations. Till we meet again in the next episode, stay tuned.